This might just be local, but where I live, a shit ton of businesses closed. I mean, half of them were closed. Not just because of the shutdown, they were closed permanently. I think the pandemic was the nail in the coffin for a lot of businesses that were already on the edge of just making it, and others have continued to struggle because, well, things are just more expensive. I've noticed I no longer go to sit-down restaurants because my grocery bills are so expensive. Why go spend $40, $50 for one meal when it costs $150, $200 every 2 weeks for groceries? It just doesn't make sense anymore for a lot of people. I think the dining experience changed as a whole post-pandemic. Lots of places had to resort to DoorDash-type businesses to make up for losses, and that in itself has changed the dining experience. The health system is wrecked. Way too many nurses got burnt out and left the profession. Not just nurses, paramedics got hit hard. At one point, my paramedic friend told me 70 of their MPs were on mental health leave at once. Edit. I'm seeing a lot of comments from medics that COVID was the last push for them to leave. How burnt out you are, the ones that are still there and struggling, from lab techs, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. To each and every one of you, you have my most sincere and heartfelt thanks for the jobs you have done and continue to do, and I hope we can eventually change the industry to be more in your favor. Now I wanted to address this comment made by UI Begoff, in case they delete it. Is this where they take time off to go to heavy metal concerts? What a shitty thing to say about people who put their physical and mental health on the line every day to protect and care for every single one of them. Edit 2. I realize now that I mistyped in my original comment. I would like to apologize. Independent, smaller D-music venues never really recovered. This has really left a void in my life. I used to go to house shows a lot as well, and those are all gone unless it's a college band. I'm hoping it will slowly recover. Speaking of college bands, they're all cover bands now. There's hardly any new musicians playing mostly original music. It's so weird. Edit. Some of you are responding like this. You're wrong, because that's not how it works in my largely populated city. People's driving is so out of whack. My only concern is to make it home in one piece. I have worked in insurance claims for years and years. I don't talk to people anymore, just manage repair shops. But whenever I am checking the facts of loss for the past 3 years, things are just batshit. There are hundreds more single car accidents every year in my area than there were before the pandemic. So I'm not sure if people are drinking more or if it's a mental health thing or what. But before the pandemic, it was all rear ends from commutes. Now it's people driving full speed into their garage walls and guardrails. I went to go get Taco Bell at 10:0 and it was closed. I'm sorry you had to go through that. We are in this together. Don't give up. White Castle too. The days of getting a sack of murder burgers or tacos at 2 or 3 in the morning are over. Very sad. Even the bars are closing at 12 midnight. My social work life, after living like a hermit for 2 years and working from home, it's taking me a long time to go out like before. My husband just informed me I haven't left the house in 4 days. I had no idea. It's insane, my social anxiety from isolation for 2 years and practically no contact with friends or even peers in the physical world has crippled my mental state. I feel like I can't even have conversations with people or even just be perceived. I'm getting better with time, but my God, it feels like I'm stuck this way permanently. Young people's desire to go into healthcare. We won't realize it for a generation or so, but healthcare in America was already chronically understaffed. The pandemic burning out medical professionals and discouraging young people from going into healthcare is going to have a negative effect on the quality of healthcare, not only in the United States, but other hard-hit countries too. Combine that with the long-term health effects of COVID, along with an ever more obese and chronically ill population, and yay, it looks pretty fucking bad. People seem so much shittier in large group public situations now. I don't know what it is, but etiquette in places like a movie theater used to be standard, but every experience I've had lately has been horrible. People talking, sitting there on their phones, and other just generally bad things. I've heard the same about concerts, but haven't been to as many myself. I've heard from others where people used to be polite, help each other up in pits and stuff and so on. They now just don't give a fuck. It's like people are just more rude now for some reason. I'm really interested to know if this is happening everywhere or if I just live in a shitty, rude-ass place. Dude, people treat movie theaters like their living rooms now. It's absurd. And it's all ages too. I understand really young kids, but the parents don't even bother to control them. Last movie I saw, adults were having full-on conversations the entire time. It's rude as hell. People have completely lost their manners. When I saw Halloween, a family came in, I shit you not, with a noisy baby in a stroller. Every 20 minutes, the mom was walking back and forth in the front aisle with a baby in her arms. Any type of 24/7 business is just a memory. I can't trust the hours of any business on Google anymore. Places just close whenever the fuck now. Yeah, a lot of bars that used to be 2 am changed to midnight and haven't changed back. Partially staffing issues though. My local Greasy Spoon diner is still 24/7. I cherish them so much more now after everything. Time perception. 2019 was 3, soon to be 4, years ago. Edit, thank you for all the likes and award. This is the most karma I've gotten on Reddit, so kind of kicking myself for not using my main account low. My brain still thinks that 2019 was last year. I don't know if you've watched The Good Place, but it's like we've been stuck in the dot about the I in Jeremy Bearimy. This game came out in 2015. So it's a recent release. Well, no, it came out 7 years ago. What the fuck? Even more ironic, the game was about a man waking up after a 9 years coma. The cost of living is pretty fucked. Food prices just keep going up. We're buying less than ever, and more generic, less premium version of everything, and yet we're paying easily twice as much as our far more luxurious and full cart of groceries we were getting in 2010. Night shift people lives. Nothing is ever open late anymore. Just went into the night shift recently and realized this. No food, no errands. There's the gyms and your home, and that's your life. This is a really good point. I work second shift, so I stay up pretty late. Pre-pandemic, I could go grocery shopping, run a few errands, grab some food somewhere at night, but almost everywhere closes down by 9 p.m. now. Even fast food joints are rarely 24 hours anymore. Edit. Worcester, Ma, for those asking. Feels like it's a more to each their own sense of living. People don't appear to be as connected as before the pandemic. The pandemic brought me much closer to my wife and son. It also made me incredibly jaded, cynical, and much less trusting of everyone outside of these walls. Essential versus non-essential employees, better known as those who had to show up physically in person and those allowed to stay home. Biggest division in the workplace. Mentally, it will never be the same in the workplace. Yes, I am so glad that people had the ability to work from home and still meet their financial needs. I'm so glad that those resources were available. And there is no nostalgia for quarantine for the essential worker. It's hard to hear others talk about how they kept themselves busy or took up a new hobby when I can only remember being so overwhelmed and stressed. I was unbelievably bitter by this. Everyone I knew was telling me how great it was drinking beer in the sun, pools out, saving so much money whilst still being paid. I was still doing 12-hour shifts, fixing trains that were running empty. All the bosses and office staff were furloughed or working from home and sending snotty emails about what work to do. Being told how important you are, yet being treated like slaves. We were told we'd get hazard pay, and we did, but it was only $1 extra per hour. That's a slap in the face. That's corporate saying, the risk of you getting COVID is worth $1 to us. Used car market is completely fucked, as are flight prices. It's scary. I have an older car, and I'm one accident away from not being able to afford a new vehicle. Before you could get a decent car for $10 to $15, and now in the area of the US I live, I saw a 1999 with a 250 miles going for $12. Car lots in my area are still upcharging for their cars on their lot. Ford Mavericks, base are $19, are going for around to $50. It's wild. I bought my car in Sep 2019. 3 years later, put in 40 miles on it, and the Kelly Blue Book is almost exactly the same. As a teacher, I can say that it's definitely affected kids in a way people don't realize. Kids who had their first year of school, or even second, during the pandemic act quite different than kids who had a normal introduction to school. Many of them seem to have fewer social skills and higher anxiety than kids from previous years. I work in preschool, and this year we have at least 3x the amount of special needs, speech and language delay, children. I'm in my 40s, but the pandemic really cut the list of friends I socialized with in half. We got out of the habit of seeing one another, and now that things are back to normal, we just made a habit out of not having dinner dates and stuff like that. When I realized this was happening, it made me look back and realize that I was the one who used to plan things and reach out. I made the conscious decision to stop being the one who always reached out, called and texted, and I now see that I'm only in touch with half the people that I used to be. Edit. I am not talking about socially awkward, depressed, introverted people. If anything, I'm the introvert, and I still always made a point to reach out. I'm referring to people who still go out, celebrate holidays and birthdays, and socialize. Just not with me anymore, apparently. There are only so many times I can try and make plans with people who don't do the same with me. I cannot be the same with me. I cannot be the one putting 100s into a friendship. Price of eating out. Fast food is now almost the same price as a cheap sit-down restaurant pre-COVID. The entire hospitality industry. Up in price, way the F down in quality. Don't forget the new 20 service fee added to every bill now too. It's now gone from 69 to 96. I honestly don't think the majority of Americans especially truly understand just how fucked the healthcare system is and is going to be. Not just staff burnout, but we have nationwide backorders on some really key medications and even things like blood and albumin shortages. There have been times that we've literally just not had the supplies available to give a blood transfusion and have had to resort to alternative treatments for things like seizures because we simply do not have the normal medications available. We have major equipment shortages too. There were several months that we couldn't consistently get Foley catheter kits and we're having to Frankenstein things together. Currently, the only A-line kits my facility has are the double port arms that we use for swans. Bariatric beds. Good luck finding one. Entire supply chains and productions lines have ground to a halt. Add staff burnout, staffing shortages, increased patient loads, deceased equipment, and it's just a domino town. But most people, not a single fucking clue. No school on snow days. Our town directly said that snow days are a joyful part of childhood, and they would keep snow days. I'm sure it also has to do with power outages. If some kids don't have power and can't tune in, or if teachers from other towns don't have power and can't teach. But I thought it was a nice sentiment. I'm not even school anymore, and I'm outraged about that. Our school district announced during the virtual learning period that they would not be taking snow days away from the kiddos. It was cool for my son last year, but now he has a job and will learn they don't give off about the snow. Ha 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 ha. I went to middle and high school in Florida, and our version of that was hurricane days. Or when the school's air conditioner broke, because at that point, the Mad Max universe seemed like a paradise. They kept snow days in my town, even when the kids were in hybrid classes. Well, due to COVID and healthcare fuckery, when I got really sick, not COVID, Jan 2020, and then all the doctor's offices shut down, and then all the doctor's offices shut down, and then rescheduled again, and I didn't get the care I needed. The first appointment I had with a specialist ended up being Aug 2020, and after that it was so hard to get appointments set up because everyone was so backed up from not seeing people for so long. I went to the ER a couple times, but I have a rare thing. They were not able to help me. And because of that, I have permanent nerve damage in my head. I'm basically trapped in a never-ending migraine, cause of how COVID fucked up seeing doctors. Also, making doctor's appointments is a lot harder than pre-COVID. Shit sucks. What do you mean 3 months? No, this isn't a 3-4 month issue. This is a 2-week max issue. I've had 2 brain surgeries in the past year. I have no thyroid. Do you really want to tell me 3 months? Do you know what happened the last time I was made to wait 3 months? Cerebral spinal fluid had started gushing out of my nose. When I need to talk to a doctor, I need to talk to a doctor, I need to talk to a doctor. It ruined me on traffic. For one glorious year, as an essential worker, I had the roads almost entirely to myself. It was beautiful. I feel this so hard. I got so spoiled with my commute. Now it's back to the bullshit. Those were glorious days for us truck drivers. I drove through nice at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday without ever touching the brakes. I'm an electrician. The ability to drive to almost anywhere in less than half the time it takes now. Sigh. Those were the good old days. The lockdowns happened during my last semester of university. I've never had an in-person job, only work from home, which I realize is a blessing, but also makes it feel like it's not real. I have no work friends, have never met my supervisor in person. I do all my work from my desk in my room. It feels like pretend. I worked for almost a year during COVID for a company without meeting anyone in person. It was like a really dull video game until I met people. Now, it's like a really stressful video game. Sometimes I break eye contact in meeting just to remind myself I'm not there with everybody on the meeting. I'm really alone. My perception on money. I worked so hard to pay off debt, save up for a new house, get promotions. Now with the rise of housing costs and inflation, I feel like money is literally such a made-up thing and I have no control over anything, even with all the right decisions. 2 steps forwards, followed by 3 steps backwards. Funny you say that. In my minimum wage job, I got a promotion and I finally got to a point where I was surviving enough to save a couple hundred in the bank as savings. Then I graduated and moved in with my lady and split the rent, so basically we got more scooped and we're putting in half each, so it's cheaper. Then I got hired in the field I graduated in that came with a huge pay raise and my savings portion got substantially bigger. And then the economy followed. Now I'm saving about the same as I was in my minimum wage job. It feels like I moved forward, but I'm back to square one. Same here. The pandemic financially traumatized me. I hoard any money I can, became more cheap in my spending, and forgo purchases I may not necessarily need to out of fear. Factor in rising costs of living, inflation, interest rates, and more. Yes, I'm 24, other workers in our age group, young professionals who all have at least 1, maybe 2, STEM degrees. Money just seems fake. Older people in my workplace talk about it like it has inherent value, rather than as a tool used to discuss value. And with costs, inflation, student loan debt, and a bunch of things that don't tie money to either goods, services, or labors, stocks, crypto, ETHs, money just seems fake. Leaving the house. Goes to Subway, I can make a better sandwich at home. Goes to a nail salon, I can paint my nails better than this lady. Goes to a hair salon, I've been cutting my hair solo for 2 years now. I'm a pro. Goes to work, I can do all of this more efficiently at home. Goes to Applebee's, I can provide myself with mediocre service at home. Goes to Walmart, I can order all of this online. Why did I leave the house again? I can provide myself with mediocre service at home. Laughed when I got here. I'm not sure if anyone else feels the same way, but my perception of time hasn't really returned back to normal since then. I still have this weird feeling I'll be going back to some old job I'm not going back to. It was just such an abrupt end to a lot of things we thought we were taking a short break from. The past 3 years still seem like the present to me. I kept a journal around that time and noted that weeks feel fast and slow. It's odd. Like when Friday comes around, I'd think, damn, a week passed already. But at the same time, a news article from last week would feel like it was from ages ago. Yeah, feels like we're going into 2020 part 3, not 2023. I cannot recall what I did in 2021. That whole year is gone. I'm still skeptical, but I can be sure that the pandemic took place for as long as anywhere between 1 and 13 years. I still feel like it's a weird dream. I definitely feel this way. Because of the pandemic, I permanently work from home. I've benefited from it immensely, but I also feel like I haven't left work at all in about 3 years. It's become a weird time warp where I feel like I work all day because I work sporadically throughout the entire day. I almost never know what day it is or the date. I feel like this isn't talked about enough to BH. For me, it seems like 2020 never really began. Unfortunately, a lot of people lost their lives during that time, and a lot of loved ones are gone that can never be replaced. For me, I just continue that I find myself thinking that the year is 2020, as if the 2 years after all happened within the year. For context, I graduated from university, that tail end of 2020, and began graduate school the year following, but it still feels like 2020 never needed because of the lack of physical presence and ceremonies at that time. It just seems as if 2020 hasn't really ended yet. My waistline and my mental well-being. It's my own fault, but I was about 6 months sober and working out daily before COVID. A few days later, half my department and my co-manager are laid off. I'm suddenly working 14-hour days in extremely stressful conditions. Walking my dog and working out took a back seat to a shot or two of Jack to calm my nerves and whatever comfort food I could get from Grubhub. Life is better now, but I haven't quite kicked all the bad habits I gained from those days. Stress affects me differently, and I'm a lot more sensitive to it than I used to be. I'm so sorry, friend. I understand about stress. I have anxiety disorder, and the pandemic really set me back with my healing. Hang in there, we are all doing the best we can. You are not alone. We were never in this together. I'm in healthcare. We were heroes when needed, but when we aren't, we are flexed off the schedule without pay. I'm sure the office folks that aren't on the floor providing the actual care get paid though. I no longer recommend going into healthcare for anybody. Many people were in it with us until they encountered even the slightest hint of inconvenience. Then they went fucking feral. If it's like this everywhere, but certainly where I live, a lot of the stores and restaurants still have shitty hours. They close a lot earlier than they used to before the pandemic, and there's no sign of them ever returning to their normal hours of operation, which really sucks for people like me, whose schedules only allow for late-night shopping trips. Another thing I've noticed with certain restaurants is their quality of food and taste have suffered dramatically. Some of my favorite places to eat aren't nearly as good as they used to be. Children's education, mental health, coping skills, and socialization. My wife is an elementary educator, and it's shocking how far kids regressed during the pandemic. By almost every measure, this generation of kids is in big trouble. I'm optimistic that the trend will right itself over time, but it's really sad to see. My daughter was 4 when the pandemic hit and turned 5 in the summer of 2020. We tried to do online kindergarten. Do not recommend. It was awful. She was saying things like, I can't do it, I'm not smart, I'm a bad kid, every day because she just couldn't sit there and look at a tablet all day and learn to read and write. It was a disaster, and my mental health has never been worse. She's 7 now, and they let her restart kindergarten in person last fall, and she's doing well in 1st grade, but holy guacamole are she and her peers struggling with social and behavioral stuff. God help them. I just made the move from a middle school setting to an elementary school one. The kids this year are okay, but the current 4th grade class, which I'll have in 2 years, can't read. They just can't. They don't understand phonics. They can't write words longer than 2 or 3 letters. The ones who can read don't retain anything. Over 60 of them qualify for S. The next closest group we have to that is 23s. But that was unheard of when that group, currently juniors, were coming up. People in 5th and 6th grades are seriously discussing early retirement because there's just not enough support for kids that low. We don't teach basic skills like reading and writing in our grade. Our district sure as heck won't hire people to help us. The lower grade levels have their own problems coming up. It's going to be a shit show. I was recently visited by a former student. She's a bright, ambitious girl who works her ass off and always has. She didn't crack 4 digits on the set. She did worse on the act, and she said that's the trend across the board. Visiting colleges have basically told the kids that they are trying to weight standardized test scores less than ever before to support these kids because they just can't get the scores that classes before them have been able to make. The county school in our district couldn't take a yearbook pick for the 1400 club on SAT. There, literally, weren't any kids who qualified. Not one. Heck, some universities are doing test optional or test blind entrances. These aren't even like low-tier schools. We are talking Cornell and Princeton. They're doing it out of necessity. It started when kids couldn't actually get to a testing location or take the test at home during COVID. It's now extended because of so many reasons. The benefit here is kids who are talented and bright but not good test takers are not overlooked. But things are about to get a lot more weird, I think. Education in the USA was already a major problem. The system we've got now isn't sustainable. Not with the kind of kid we have now. COVID just made a glaring issue even more obvious. It'll be interesting to see what happened. Yes, maturity levels are so off in kids who were in the pandemic shutdown. Source: teacher who experiences it daily. My wife works in early years education. Wait times for extra help used to be weeks. For assessments on speech and language issues, she contacted the service this week and got told it's now 6.5 months. There is a generation of kids who got messed up just because they were born at the wrong moment, and we as a society haven't noticed yet. Increased polarization of people politically, socially, economically. The rich got richer, and the poor got poorer, like every financial crisis ever. Grocery shopping at 2:0 was the best thing ever. Now I have to shop with the rest of you hooligans, and it fucking sucks. I work second shift, get off at 11 Used to do all my shopping after work. Now everything is closed by the time I get off, and I have to do all my shopping during the day. I hate it so much. Used to be plenty of options to grab a quick bite to eat on the way home as well. Half the time even McDonald's is closed. By the time even McDonald's is closed, by the time I leave work nowadays. Nothing being 24 hours and more is awful. That's the thing I miss the most. Going to Walmart at ONM so I don't have to deal with people blocking the aisles, walking slowly or almost running you over with their cart because they're coming out of an aisle like it's a turn in NASCAR. Yeah, I used to do the same thing. I hate crowded grocery stores. Tomb Groceries was my jam. Modern dating. Can confirm dating post-pandemic is an absolute nightmare. I'm totally dying alone. My wife and I started dating 12 years ago, so dating apps weren't really a thing, although I used OkCupid a few times for hookups. But now my single friends tell me what dating is like, and it's a different world. It feels so inorganic. It also feels so transactional, like capitalism of attraction. It's kinda like you used to be able to apply to a job in person and charm your way into a position. Now it's all online and you have to hit certain keywords, avoid certain keywords to even be considered. Dating apps sound like that. The personality doesn't matter so much as the resume, and then it's the phone interview. And if you outcompete the other 6 applicants, you can move on to in-person. It feels like the days of just meeting someone IRL and getting those butterflies that lead to romance. They're gone, replaced with compatibility via 1,000 swipes. Sobriety. I got sober pre-pandemic, and I'm really glad I did. I would have drank myself to death during COVID if I hadn't. 3 years sober on December 8th. I feel like everyone is more bitter now. Like we all saw through the sham of society, time feels different now. Things just feel off compared to pre-2020. When my country went into lockdown, I was free to continue working, and traffic was essentially non-existent. As soon as lockdowns finished, it seemed as though there was a huge increase in aggression on the road. 2020 made 2016 feel like 2012. I've worked retail for years, and just the other day I was telling a long-time co-worker friend that people just don't exchange pleasantries anymore. I've always been pretty outgoing and tried to say hi to everyone. It's kinda part of my job, I guess. But now, it's a lot more rare to get a response back or even eye contact. I feel everyone is just more rude and angry now. It's like the facade is starting to collapse. I think it's going to get worse. I am not happy about this. Pre-pandemic, we maintained a very faint veil that everyone in society at least sort of cared about each other. The pandemic took that veil off and lit it on fire. The selfishness brought to the forefront during the pandemic continues to impact everything to this day.